Caleb Morton's life could only be described as humdrum. He was a middle school teacher in a quiet suburban town. His days focused on lesson plans, correcting papers, and feeding his two. His wife took their children, Mason, 8, and Clara, 6, to soccer practice and a ballet recital. Vanessa frequently quipped that Caleb had mastered the art of being dependably reliable, and they had a comfortable house. Caleb had a tidy yard and a regular routine that could be set to a clock, but things started to change when Leonard, a retired engineer and man of quiet strength, became unwell, who spent his days cultivating a tiny vegetable garden and carving wooden toys for his grandchildren when the diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer shocked the entire family. Caleb saw it as a call to action, so he began spending his evenings and weekends. His father's little residence ensured Leonard made it to treatments, cooked healthful meals, and was never alone. With his agony, Vanessa did not take kindly to the new arrangement. "You're always at your father's place," she screamed one evening, her voice tinged with fury. Caleb had just walked. Mason and Clara were already in bed when they came through the door, having spent hours assisting Leonard in organizing his medications. Vanessa was folding laundry, her movements quick and agitated. Caleb moaned and rubbed his temples. "He's unwell." "Vanessa, he needs me, and what about us?" she shot back. "Do you have a family, Caleb, or did you forget that?" Her words hurt, but Caleb attempted to be cool. "This is Vanessa, he's my father. So what do you expect me to do? Just leave him to deal with this alone?" Vanessa's lips clenched into a tiny line. "It feels like you're abandoning us." Her accusation remained in the air. Like smoke, Caleb didn't know how to respond. He loved his family, yet Leonard's health demanded his time and attention. The man who used to be Caleb's rock was now feeble and reliant. Caleb couldn't bear to let him face it alone, but Vanessa's dissatisfaction didn't weigh on her. Dropping harsh comments throughout supper, grumbling about Caleb's absences in front of the kids, her tone became sharper. Caleb blamed her lack of patience on the burden of caring for the children, the household, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing in quiet moments when he wasn't. While tending to Leonard or managing his classroom, Caleb would replay her remarks in his thoughts, leaving us with the sentence. Felt like a weight on his chest. Was he failing his family and trying to save his father, or was there something more? Caleb was aware that something was beginning to crumble beneath the surface of their seemingly everyday lives as Leonard's condition worsened, that the path ahead would only get more difficult. Little did he realize that Vanessa's boiling irritation was as Leonard's condition worsened, it was the prelude to something far more severe than he could have anticipated. Caleb made a difficult decision. He requested shorter hours at school. It meant a reduced wage, but it provided him more time to care for his father. Vanessa, furious, she slammed a saucepan into the stove and shouted, "This is ridiculous." Caleb helped Mason with his math homework at the kitchen table, and you were sacrificing your job for him. Caleb looked up, frowning. "For my father, Vanessa. I assumed you'd understand that you're running yourself to the ground for a dying man who won't even notice half of." Caleb clenched his mouth as her words hit him like a slap, shifted his focus to Mason, who had frozen in mid-sum, his small face furrowed with uncertainty at the tension. Caleb forced himself to smile. "Let's finish this problem, buddy," he whispered softly, protecting his son from the brewing storm. But Vanessa wasn't done. In the days that followed, her irritation became something more insidious. Caleb noticed how she began to weave sharp comments into talks with the kids. "Dad is always with Grandpa these days," she explained Clara while braiding her hair. "I believe he doesn't have time for us." Mason frowned when he heard this, but Grandpa is sick, and Mom and Dad are assisting him. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Families are meant to come first, aren't they?" Caleb overheard these. His jaw tightened every time he tried to oppose her influence, reassuring the children that he loved them profoundly and explained the value of being there for family in difficult times. But the damage was done. Vanessa's remarks stuck in the children's minds. Caleb battled to eradicate the seeds of doubt. The breaking point came on a gray. Caleb went home from Leonard's on a rainy evening after another tough day of appointments and minor accomplishments. Leonard had managed to finish half a bowl of soup, which felt like a victory. He found Vanessa waiting for him in the "We need to talk," she stated coldly, arms crossed in the living room. Caleb dropped into a chair, too tired to argue, yet worried about what was to come. Vanessa didn't mince words. "This can't continue on. He needs to go to a hospice, and we're not equipped to handle this. And frankly, Caleb, you're ignoring your family." Caleb's tiredness gave way to, "He's my father, Vanessa, and I'm not placing him in a hospice to die alone like an unwanted burden," she scoffed. "Pitiful old man clinging to life. What's the sense of dragging this out? He doesn't have anything to leave. You're wasting our time and resources for someone who can't even give back, not with money or property." Caleb rose to his feet, his fists tight, his voice quiet but full of menace. "How dare you? Leonard is more than some old man spent his whole life to provide for me and ensure my future. He's the reason I became a teacher. He's a nice man, an exceptional engineer, and a father who deserves respect, not this." Vanessa, who was spewing rubbish, rolled her eyes, her frustration evident. "Ruin your life for him, lose your job, and for Caleb to remain by his side while he..." "Yes," Caleb thundered, cutting her short. His voice shook with emotion. "If that's what it takes, I'll be there for him. I don't care about money or employment. If anything else, I won't allow my father die alone." The room became tense. Vanessa glanced at him, her expression filled with shock and wrath. Then she issued the ultimatum that would shatter their lives good. She continued, her voice chilly. "If he's so essential to you, then choose him or me." Caleb glanced at her, his heart sad, but his resolve unshaken. "I can't forsake my father, Vanessa. Not now or ever." Her expression tightened, and she turned on her heel. "You've made your choice," she muttered as she burst out of the room. Caleb remained alone, the weight of his decision settling upon him, knowing there might be consequences, but in his heart he felt positive he had done the right thing. Family, he thought, meant standing. After a few days, Caleb was washing dishes, no matter the cost. Vanessa entered the kitchen with a huge stack of papers in her hand. Her attitude was calm and detached, but her words hit him like a freight train. "I've had enough," she simply stated. "Caleb, the papers on the counter are the divorce papers that I'm leaving today." Froze the plate slipping from his hands back into the dirty water. "What are you?" Vanessa crossed her arms and questioned. "What are you talking about?" "Honestly inefficient, this whole thing has sapped me. You're fascinated with your father. You've abandoned me and our marriage. I can't do this any longer. I need..." Caleb echoed, disbelief darkening his. "Vanessa, this isn't some nuisance. My father is dying." She didn't flinch, "and I'm leaving. I need to take care of myself. I've booked a holiday. For the next few weeks, I'll have my lawyer contact you about custody arrangements." Caleb glanced at her, mind reeling. "So you're just leaving the kids on me when I'm all ready?" His words stuck in his throat. "God knows where you're headed, Vanessa." Even though I had already made up my mind, she abruptly interrupted her speech. Another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Caleb alone in the kitchen with the papers that indicated the end of. Caleb received a dismal news from Leonard's doctor on the same day of their marriage. Caleb's father most likely had just a month or a handful of weeks remaining. The news weighed deeply on him, yet he, determined to make Leonard's remaining days as meaningful as possible, he packed up Mason and Clara without hesitation. They moved into Leonard's house with their favorite toys, clothes, and books. Children were a catalyst for Leonard Mason's enthusiastic talk, and Clara's giggles gave light to the dark days. Leonard smiled in ways Caleb hadn't seen in months. Caleb took a long leave, absence from work, focusing solely on caring for his father and raising the children, despite the duty. It was startling to witness Leonard giggle while Clara manicured his fingernails, or Mason shared school anecdotes. Leonard had a memorable moment late one evening after the kids had gone to bed. Caleb sat in the little living room. Leonard, frail but striving to preserve a happy face, sipped weak tea. Caleb softened as he replied, "I realize things aren't easy right now." Leonard began, his voice weak but firm. "I see the tension on your face, Vanessa. She's not here." Caleb hesitated and shook his head. "No, Dad, she left saying she wanted a break." Leonard groaned, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry, son, for becoming a burden on you. Maybe I should have gone to a hospice, but you shouldn't have to." Caleb stopped suddenly. He reached forward, holding Leonard's fragile hand. "You are not a burden. Don't you ever say that." Leonard's eyes welled up with tears again. "I never wanted this for you, and I thought I would be able to handle things on my own and not disrupt your life as you have. Your children, your job, your own concerns." And suddenly Caleb shook his head and his voice shattering. "You don't understand, Dad. You are my life right now, as you have always been. When I was unwell as a child, you remained up all night and held my hand, making sure I knew I wasn't alone." I will never forget Leonard's shoulders. He shook and tears streamed down his cheeks, like dads do. Whispered, "And now it's my turn," Caleb said firmly, his tears falling freely. "To make sure you know you're not alone. You're not going to die in some cold, impersonal hospital room. You're going to be here with your family, with people who love you." The two men clasped firmly, their tears mingling. Clung to each other. Caleb felt Leonard's weakness, the fragility of a life approaching its conclusion, but he also felt the power of their link, unyielding and unshakable, built by a lifetime. "Dad," Caleb gasped out, "I love you too, son." Leonard. Caleb felt a sense of peace for the first time in his life, with his voice barely above a whisper. Selected the route of love, loyalty, and honoring the man who had impacted his life. Leonard put his head on Caleb's shoulder, and both men realized that despite the obstacles ahead, face them jointly as father and son before you find out what happens next. Please subscribe to the channel. The days passed in a blur for Caleb. He barely had time to grasp the fact that he was caring for Leonard while also rearing Mason and Clara. Emotional turbulence of his crumbling marriage. But when the call came from Vanessa's lawyer 2 weeks later, Caleb knew he couldn't ignore it. The court hearing was planned for the next week, a day that loomed. Leonard's condition was getting worse by the day, and Caleb couldn't imagine leaving his father's side to attend a judicial struggle, his lawyer Sarah reading compassionately and sharply. Professional informed him she'd do everything she could to delay the proceedings given your circumstances. Ave a good case for a postponement. Sarah revealed over the phone that your father's health is plainly deteriorating, and you are the primary caregiver for him. I'll file the move first thing in the morning. A week later, Sarah presented. In their plea before the judge, she described Leonard's fatal condition and the strain Caleb bore as a single parent. In the absence of Vanessa, the judge, a middle-aged woman with a gentle but strong demeanor, listened. Following a lengthy deliberation, she ruled in Caleb's favor, postponing the hearing for a month and a half. "Take care of your family, Mr. Morton," the court remarked. "I will see you in court when you are ready that evening." Caleb received in. Vanessa made a surprise phone call, her voice shrill and frustrated. "Because of your father," she snapped, "and we can't even get a divorce." Caleb felt his wrath rise, but he pushed himself to remain calm. "Vanessa, what's ludicrous is that you left me, abandoned our children, and now you're trying to pressure me into rushing this while I'm dealing with my father's final days. Where the hell are you?" Anyway, Vanessa hesitated and responded defensively, "I'm visiting my mother. Don't shout at me, Caleb." You're the one who compelled me to take radical action. I could have gone nuts living like that. I needed a break. Caleb tightened his grip on the phone, echoed his voice filled with surprise. That's what you're calling this leaving. I'll handle everything while you relax and don't get to rewrite. Vanessa, you made a choice to go away, so don't guilt me, she shot back. You didn't leave me with any other options. The comment stung, but Caleb had heard enough Vanessa. He stated firmly, I don't have time for this. I'm busy. Without waiting for her response, he ended the conversation and set it down. Caleb returned to the living room, where Leonard was dozing in his recliner, and Clara was sitting on the arm of the chair, reading him a story about a valiant knight saving a princess. Mason was splayed on the floor with his Lego set, making an impressive castle. Caleb felt a pang of thankfulness in the middle of upheaval. Whatever Vanessa's behaviors are, his children and Leonard's health was anchored by his father in the midst of uncertainty. Decreased quickly over the next few days. Once a guy of quiet vigor and unlimited, Caleb stayed in bed for a week because he was determined to move. Near attentive to his father's every need as the children played quietly in the next room, they're laughing a little. One evening, when the house dropped into the tranquil rhythm of night, I took solace in the gathering stillness. Leonard yelled for Caleb. His voice, albeit feeble, conveyed a sense of. Caleb swiftly made his way to his father's room, drawing a chair to sit near the bed. Leonard's eyes were sleepy, but filled with desire. Caleb began, his voice just above a whisper. I need to thank you for everything, Father. Caleb interrupted. You, Don? TF to Leonard lifted a shaky hand to silence him. Let me finish, son. You've been my greatest blessing, a decent man, a terrific parent, and an even greater son. Caleb's eyes welled up with more tears than I could have imagined, yet he nodded. Letting Leonard continue, I know life hasn't been kind to you lately, Leonard remarked, his gaze firm despite his frailty. But remember, this strength isn't about never falling, but about getting up. Every time you do, Caleb, you've done right by me. You've also done right by your children. Just don't lose yourself trying to solve everything. Dad, Caleb's voice broke the. I should be thanking you for everything you taught me, for being there, for simply being you. Leonard smiled slightly. I didn't do anything special. All a father can do is love you. They sat in silence for a long period, Leonard's hand resting gently on Caleb's. Caleb knew this was farewell, his heart aches, but he drew strength from Leonard's. I love you, Dad, Caleb replied quietly. I also love you, son, Leonard said. With that, he closed his eyes, his breathing steady yet weak as sleep seized him the next morning. Caleb discovered. Caleb sat beside his father, Leonard, who had departed peacefully and softly in the night, his trip completed. For a long time, his anguish was mitigated by the knowledge that Leonard's suffering had ended, but the finality of. Caleb had no time to linger in sorrow as he had to make arrangements for the funeral, handle legalities, and guarantee the children were cared for after composing. He contacted Vanessa, expecting she would step up for his family in their time of need. Vanessa responded after several rings. Her voice was tense and almost clipped Caleb. What is it, Dads? Caleb's voice was firm, despite the lump in his throat. I need you to come back and take care of the children for a few days. There was a significant lull in. Caleb believed he heard a faint whisper, a man's voice low and indistinct. Vanessa's response was hasty and defensive. I can't right now. I've got things going on. I'll send Mom. Instead, she'll assist Vanessa, Caleb began, but he stopped himself. Whatever was happening on her end, he didn't have the energy to worry right now. So merely. Samantha arrived later that evening, warm as promised. No nonsense. She took over the children's care with experienced ease, giving Caleb the space he needed. Organized Leonard's funeral. Samantha asked no questions regarding Vanessa, though Caleb imagined she had plenty. Funeral was a small but meaningful affair among friends, neighbors, and former colleagues. Came to pay their respects to a man whose quiet strength had impacted so many people. Caleb stood with Mason and Clara by his side, feeling both the weight of his loss and the solace of knowing that his father was deeply loved that day. Caleb was looking through paperwork after the burial when his phone rang. The number was strange to him. Mr. Morton, in a formal tone, questioned, "This is Harold Whitmore, an attorney handling your father's estate. I've been trying to reach you, and I have some news regarding an inheritance." Caleb frowned confusedly. "Inheritance? I wasn't aware, my dad. It's a little complicated," the lawyer interrupted it. "It would be ideal if we could meet to discuss the details." Caleb agreed on a time for later in the week. He hung up the phone, his mind racing. His father had never spoken anything about inheritance. As far as Caleb knew, Leonard had lived modestly on his pension, leaving little for Samantha, who had overheard the call. Entered the room. "What was that about?" she inquired with wonder in her tone. Caleb looked up. His expression was equal parts perplexity and intrigue. Samantha smiled weakly. "Dad left me something. I have no idea what it could be. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's meaningful." Caleb nodded with curiosity and, with fear whirling in his mind, he knew whatever awaited him would be a farewell gift from the man who had fashioned. Caleb entered into Harold Whitmore's calm, book-lined office, and his life was radically changed. The last 2 days had been an emotional whirlwind, losing Leonard, organizing the funeral, and now this unexpected meeting concerning an inheritance Caleb didn't know existed. Harold A. Mr. Morton, a middle-aged man with a nice smile and piercing eyes, rose to meet him. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he added, firmly shaking Caleb's hand. "Your father was a fantastic man. Thank you." Caleb responded, taking the given seat, "But I have to admit I'm confused because my father never stated anything about an inheritance." Harold nodded compassionately and motioned to a thick folder on his desk. "I understand. Let me explain." Over the following hour, Harold walked. Caleb went over Leonard's financial paperwork, and the facts left him astonished. Leonard, it turned out, had he stealthily built a significant fortune with various bank accounts, a diverse stock portfolio, and even Harold approximated the total worth of Leonard's gold and silver bars housed securely in a bank vault. Assets to be just shy of 8 figures, potentially more depending on the current market. Caleb blinked, unable to digest the figures. "How is this possible?" he said, his voice heavy with astonishment. "My father lived so cheaply. He never bought anything he didn't need, and he never. Could he have all this?" Harold leaned back, his expression serious. "Father was a guy of remarkable intelligence and insight. He may have lived simply, but he had a talent for investing. Understood markets, investigated prospects, and made sensible, patient decisions. He wasn't flamboyant about it." Over decades, his fortune steadily expanded. Caleb shook his head, attempting to reconcile. He recognized the calm, sensible engineer with the savvy investor Harold. Leonard was a private man, and he never mentioned this to anyone. Harold spoke kindly, but he was also extremely attentive in our final. Caleb's breath hitched as he spoke at length about you. Harold nodded and opened the folder. Taking out a handwritten note, he stated, "He wanted you to have this because he believed in you, Caleb. He thought the world of you. He was extremely proud of your work as a teacher." Caleb accepted the letter, his hands quivering. He was aware of how hard you worked and how much you sacrificed for your family, but he was also concerned that as a teacher, might impede your potential to attain what he knew was your desire. Caleb swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Knew about my dream." Harold smiled softly, and he told me how much. "You've always wanted to start a private school for gifted children, a place where students could thrive under the supervision of." Caleb identified your calling as someone who truly cared about their potential, and he wanted to make sure you had. Caleb couldn't keep back his tears any longer, and he held the letter to his chest, his father's faith in him resonating profoundly. "He believed in me far more than you realize," Harold remarked warmly to Leonard. "Considered you a great and talented person. He wanted this money to offer you the freedom to build your desire and to create a pleasant, comfortable life for you and your children." Caleb sat in mute sobbing. Leonard had lived frugally, with tears flowing down his face as he felt the weight of his father's love and sacrifice, giving himself luxury so that he might give Caleb the skills to attain his. Caleb said, his voice shaking, "Thank you for sharing." Harold offered him an understanding nod for your father's legacy. Caleb saw brilliance not only in these accounts, but also in the person you are. Caleb departed the office that day. It is now up to you to honor his vision. Leonard's leaving gift was a renewed feeling of purpose, despite his heavy heart. More than financial, it was a monument to a father's quiet and abiding love. Caleb vowed to make his father pleased as he walked out into the sunlight. Caleb chose to keep his inheritance quiet for the time being, knowing Leonard's wealth was both a blessing and a weight for him. He didn't know how people would respond, especially Vanessa, so his focus was on preparing for the approaching divorce proceedings while managing his grief at his father's death, but only days. Vanessa entered at the door following Caleb's discussion with Harold, her manner strikingly different. She grinned. Caleb was warmly carrying a casserole dish she had definitely brought up from a grocery shop, still warm in its wrapper. "I wanted to check on you and the kids," she added, her voice quiet and almost kind. "I realize this has been a difficult moment for all of you." Caleb was taken aback, looking at her in astonishment. Vanessa had been defensive and contemptuous, and now she stood before him. Caleb expressed compassion and kindness, saying, "I'm surprised to see you." Hesitantly stepping aside I'll let her in. "You seemed very busy the previous time." Vanessa made a little giggle, brushing off his statement. "I know I wasn't. My best, Caleb, but I've had time to reflect and realized I don't want to rush into anything we might regret." She sat at the dinner table as if nothing had happened, her tone nonchalant. She suggested that we put the divorce on wait for now. "Give us some time to grieve, heal, and think about the future, Caleb." He observed her attentively, his mind racing with what had changed since then. Samantha's presence during the days following Leonard's murder. Could she have overheard something regarding the inheritance? Possibly even snooped through the paperwork he'd brought home. The thought made his stomach churn. Caleb attentively observed how Vanessa avoided meeting his gaze. Vanessa's unexpected change of heart was evident in her twitching palms. I hesitated before plastering on a sorrowful smile, realizing how much I'd missed you, and I know I made mistakes, but I believe we owe it to show the kids how vital family is. At least try again. The words felt rehearsed, and Caleb couldn't. I couldn't help but notice how over-the-top her gestures had become. She even inquired about his work and the kids' school projects. Samantha, who was in the kitchen at the time, chimed in on themes she had hardly touched on. "She's right." Samantha indicated in her tone that family is most important. "Something you two should think about is reconciliation, which is what Leonard would have wanted." Caleb restrained a giggle. Caleb nodded graciously, but provided no agreement as the evening carried on. Vanessa resumed her performance and commended Caleb's parenting, discussing the good times and hinted at future initiatives they could undertake as a. Caleb listened intently, piecing together the true cause behind her rapid metamorphosis, even the faintest. The notion of an inheritance had prompted her into action. What would she do if she understood the whole magnitude of Leonard's estate? Finally, Vanessa addressed the looming divorce proceedings. "Do we really need to go through with all that legal hassle?" she said with a slight sigh. "Can't we just take some time to ponder before making any final decisions?" Caleb leaned back in his chair, his countenance serene. "But unreadable, Vanessa," he continued, his voice measured. "I appreciate you coming. I understand you have had time to contemplate, but I am still in grief. I lost my father, and this is a difficult moment for me. Vanessa opened her mouth to intervene, but Caleb maintained a harsher tone. We still need to discuss our marriage. That conversation will happen in court since the hearing is imminent. Until then, I need room to think about everything. Vanessa's face faltered for a flicker of fury crossed her features before she calmed herself again. Of course, she said, her tone excessively. Samantha left and offered Caleb a knowing gaze, but he couldn't. He forced himself to engage until the door closed behind them. Caleb groaned profoundly. Leaning against the table, the act had only just begun, but he saw through it as the court date approached. Vanessa's rapid transition into a doting wife did not set well with Caleb, who felt a growing sense of urgency. And he couldn't erase the recollection of the phone call on the day his father passed. The faint sound of a man's voice. In the background, with Vanessa's apprehensive tone, he decided to confer with Sarah, his lawyer, to consider his future measures. Caleb explained everything: Vanessa's abrupt return, her odd change in behavior, Samantha's potential discovery of Sarah's inheritance documents, and the lingering concern of what Vanessa had done during her absence. Listen closely, her fingers quietly tapping on the desk as Caleb concluded it. Vanessa's behavior shows that there's more to this than just a divorce, she said thoughtfully. She is hiding something, and the mention of the inheritance appears to have sparked her change of heart. Caleb nodded. I believe she is aware of the inheritance or suspects it, and I still can't forget that phone conversation, and I'm almost positive she wasn't with her mother as she stated Sarah was. Back in her chair, weighing her next words, if you're ready to go through with the divorce, we may proceed without looking into this, but if you want to know the truth, there are means to find out, as her phone may tell us. Caleb hesitated. Wouldn't that cross a? Sarah smiled slightly. It is not unlawful to check someone's phone if you have access to it, especially because she's technically still your spouse. But it's up to you whether you want closure, Caleb. Do you just want to move on over the next few days? Caleb thought about Sarah's. Finally, he realized he needed answers not only for the divorce but also for his personal peace of mind. Developed a strategy to gain access to Vanessa's phone and convinced Mason and Clara to spend time with their mother. Vanessa is eager to maintain her facade as the Vanessa and the children were about to leave, and the attentive mother quickly agreed. Caleb managed to pull out Vanessa's smartphone, and the first thing he discovered verified Samantha's concerns. Indeed, snooping through his inheritance documents, a stream of messages between Samantha and Vanessa revealed everything. Samantha, I overheard Caleb on the phone saying that he is receiving a substantial fortune. I saw the folder as well, and he's sitting on a fortune, Vanessa. Vanessa, truly how? Samantha should have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Consider the divorce. Merely stating Caleb clenched his mouth. The messages made it. He discovered that Vanessa's sudden change in behavior was motivated by financial greed rather than guilt or love. Something even more damaging is a lengthy chat with a man named Derek. Vanessa didn't proceed to her mother's ooze after leaving Caleb, according to the messages she sent. Derek, her lover, couldn't wait to see you. Vanessa, are you certain Caleb will not find out tonight? Don't worry about him. HEK is too busy playing the saint with his dying father Derek. You deserve better than this mess. Just stay with me, Vanessa, and let me figure things out first. Vanessa claimed to be at her mother's Caleb's, and the dates of the texts coincided. His hands trembled as he went farther, capturing images of the incriminating texts. He returned the phone to its place. Just when Vanessa and the kids returned the next day, Caleb shared everything. He showed Sarah the images of the messages and narrated what he had discovered. Sarah's look was dismal. As she flipped through the photographs, she expressed her happiness with the adjustments. Infidelity is a crucial aspect in divorce processes. If we produce this proof in court, it may affect Caleb nodded as he discussed custody arrangements and financial settlements in his favor. I'm feeling a combination of rage and relief, and all I want is what's best for my children. Sarah told him that he had done the appropriate steps to get her out of his life. Approach the hearing with this information, but I'll handle the plan. You focus on being calm and the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as Caleb and Vanessa sat at opposing tables, with their lawyers around them. Caleb remained calm, his determination sharpened by weeks of preparation. Vanessa, on the other hand, appeared uneasy as she glanced toward Caleb, as if attempting to read his mood. Fair woman in her 50s called the proceedings to order. We are here to resolve the dissolution of the marriage between Caleb Morton and Vanessa Morton. Let us begin. Vanessa's lawyer is sleek. Your Honor, before we start, a talking guy named Gerald Grant stood first. Client will want to propose that we postpone this divorce. She believes there is still a possibility to reconcile. Vanessa nodded solemnly, her voice gentle, as she addressed the court. Your Honor, I admit, I have made mistakes, but I love my husband and my children. I feel we can repair. We've lost Sarah. Reading Caleb's lawyer rose to her feet, her expression. While reconciliation may seem noble, the facts offer a quite different picture. Different image. Let me detail what has transpired in the months building up to this hearing, stated Sa started, meticulously outlining how Vanessa abandoned Caleb during one of the most hard seasons of his life. Father was terminally ill and dumped his children on him while she went on an unannounced trip. My client he was left with the tasks of caring for his ailing father, maintaining his household, and caring for two young. Vanessa went on a so-called break without communicating or providing support to the children, Sarah asserted forcefully. This is hardly the conduct of someone loyal to their spouse or family. Vanessa stiffened, leaning CL. Ozer her. I was emotionally weary. She screamed, her voice shaking. An attempt at vulnerability. I didn't manage things properly, but that didn't mean I stopped caring. I needed time to heal. Sarah arched her eyebrow and said, what does healing involve? The courtroom grew silent as you lied to your husband about where you were and spent time with another man. Sarah supplied printed evidence of Vanessa's text messages with Derek and Samantha, along with screenshots of her communication about Caleb's inheritance. Your Honor, Sarah persisted, and we have proof. Vanessa was not staying with her mother during her absence, since she said she was with her lover in addition to her. Her unexpected reappearance and renewed desire to reconnect coincided with her discovery of a fortune Caleb got after. Vanessa's face was devoid of color when his father passed these notes, revealing her objectives. Didn't let me read a note from Vanessa to her lover Derek. Sarah interrupted, bringing up the document. Don't worry about him. HEK is too busy playing the saint with his dying father. Your Honor, this is not the language of someone emotionally committed in their family. This is clear manipulation. Vanessa sprang to her feet, her composure unraveling. It's not like that. I made mistakes, but I came back because I recognized what I'd done. I love my husband. I love my children. Sarah remained calm. Your Honor, this isn't about Vanessa's professions of love, but about behaviors that reveal a pattern of abandonment, deception, and self-interest. Gerald attempted to reclaim control, raising protests over the relevancy of the communications, but the judge allowed them to stand, citing their value in. The confrontation lasted almost an hour, demonstrating intent and trustworthiness. Vanessa's original confidence broke under the weight of the data. Every attempt to explain her behavior was challenged with cold, hard truths. Sarah's arsenal timeline, text logs, and descriptions of Caleb's unwavering loyalty to his family, even under the enormous pressure of loss. Finally, Vanessa. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she cried. I just didn't know what to do. I was lost. I didn't mean to hurt. Mrs. Morton stated severely as the judge's gavel struck, calling for order. This is not about feelings. It's about accountability. When the hearings ended, the judge delivered her. Caleb was awarded full custody of Mason and Clara, as well as the family house. Vanessa would keep only a little percentage of their pooled savings, enough to restart her life, although far less than she had certainly planned for. The inheritance Leonard left Caleb, undisturbed and legally separate from marital property, remained totally under Caleb's ownership as the gavel struck. Vanessa sank on her seat, defeated and sobbing, as Caleb stood. Tall, his heart heavy, but resolute, he had battled not for spite, but for his. As he walked out of the courtroom, he felt a mixture of relief and anguish, knowing that the struggle had over, but the scars would endure outside Sarah. She rubbed his shoulder and said, "Caleb, you did great. Now it's time to focus on your." Caleb nodded, "and on building that future your father believed in." He looked up at the sky, a peaceful promise growing in his heart. This was just the beginning. In the weeks after the trial, Vanessa made repeated frantic attempts to restore her relationship with Caleb. She called, texted, and even showed up uninvited at the house, pleading with him to reconsider. She claimed that messages with Derek were misconstrued, stating they didn't imply what they appeared to, and that she had never actually. Being unfaithful was a mistake, Caleb remarked tearfully one evening while standing on his porch. "I was overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't cheat on you, I swear. Can we try again?" Caleb glanced at her with a calm resolution that Vanessa had come to recognize all too well. "Vanessa," he stated firmly, "you may deny the affair, but the real betrayal occurred when you forced me to choose between you and my father. That moment was enough to end us. I will always be cordial for the kids, but there is nothing left between us." Vanessa's face crumbled, but Caleb stood his ground, having made peace with his decision and refusing to be swayed by her. Vanessa soon gave up, and her attempts at reconciliation were intermittent and half-heartedly before completely ceasing. She tried to make a life with Derek, moving in with him in the hopes of a. Despite a fresh start, their relationship quickly worsened due to unmet expectations and smoldering animosity. Within months, they split ways, leaving Vanessa to face the consequences of her decisions alone, while Caleb focused on. He meticulously constructed a new life for himself and his children, guided by the lessons his father had given him. Managed Leonard's fortune, divided it between two priorities, and created the securing a steady financial future through additional education and attending the school he had always wanted. Investments. The school became his passion project, situated in a quiet area of town. The private academy for exceptional youngsters was dubbed the Leonard Morton Institute for Excellence as a memorial to his father's memory. Believing in the power of education, the school immediately established a reputation for its creative teaching methods. The nurturing environment reflects Caleb's vision and dedication at home. Caleb established a life full of security and warmth for Mason and Clara. He was present for everything. Milestones from Mason's soccer games to Clara's ballet recital, cherishing the. Despite his busy schedule, Caleb always made time to tell them stories about his grandfather. His calm wisdom, honesty, and the legacy of love and sacrifice that he had left. On calm evenings after the children had gone to bed, Caleb frequently sat in his, looking at the portrait of Leonard on his desk. He would grin and feel his. If you love the article, please let me know. Subscribe to the channel. I wish you a pleasant mood and good luck.